November 1519, Cortés and his conquistadors began the march into the Valley of Mexico. So far, Montezuma had sent magicians to drive the Spaniards away. He'd ordered the chiefs of Cholula to assassinate Cortés, and he'd tried to bribe the conquistador to return to Spain. Those efforts had not stopped the Spanish juggernaut. Time was running out for Montezuma to determine who or what Cortés was. So Montezuma consulted the Aztec calendar, his gods and his priests, to try and answer this question. Montezuma decided to receive Cortés as the representative of a great king, as a diplomat rather than as an enemy. He allowed Cortés and his men to ride into the city of Tenochtitlan. Here, in the courtyard of the Hospital de Jesus in Mexico City, a marker denotes the location where Cortés and Montezuma first met. The meeting was treated with all the pomp and circumstance of a royal event. With Doña Marina on hand to translate, the two leaders greeted each other formally and exchanged gifts. Now, Cortés was finally face to face with the emperor of the land he wanted.
What's going on in the minds of these military men? Had Montezuma just let the ultimate wolf into his henhouse? And what about Cortés? Surrounded by 250,000 Aztecs? Had he just walked into the largest ambush in military history?
These are the archaeological ruins of the Templo Mayor, the great temple of Tenochtitlan. A week after the Spaniards arrived, Montezuma proudly took Cortés to this sacred site. The Aztecs believed human sacrifices ensured the pleasure of their gods and made the sun rise each day. Cortés and his men were horrified. The Spaniards found this religious practice barbaric.
They sacrificed men, and they showed the heart, still beating, warm, to the sun.
The conquistadors were frightened. They begged Cortés to take them back to the coast. They were convinced Montezuma intended to sacrifice them all. Cortés shared their concerns, but he was unwilling to abandon his prize, so he made a bold move.
He befriends Moctezuma and then essentially takes him captive as hostage and forces Moctezuma to go along with it.
According to Cortés's own accounts of this incident, Montezuma went along willingly. But it seems doubtful that a man born to rule would be comfortable as a prisoner in his own home.
Montezuma is in a tough position. We don't really know what is going on in his mind. The accounts that we get about what's going on at this time are written decades after the conquest.
Next, Cortés issued an order to halt the sacrifices. Crosses and Christian icons were placed in the temples. His men destroyed all of the Aztec idols and scrubbed the temples clean of blood. Then, at the end of April 1520, a new threat to Cortés arrived. An arresting party made up of 900 conquistadors landed on the coast. The captain of the arresting party was Panfilo de Narvaez, one of the biggest and nastiest conquistadors on the entire Spanish roster. Under orders from Velázquez, Narvaez was to find Cortés and hang him. Rather than wait for Narvaez to find him, Cortés decided to be the aggressor. In May of 1520, Cortés left just 120 conquistadors to hold the capital city and its captive emperor. Cortés raced east with the rest of his army.
Cortés races down to the coast, meets them, talks to them, and convinces them with money that they should join his enterprise and become entrepreneurs with him. That he has found much more wealth than was available in Cuba, that wealth will make them very comfortable in life, and he is willing to buy them with all kinds of special deals.
On 28 May 1520, Cortés launched a surprise attack against Narvaez. The battle was fierce, but Cortés quickly got the upper hand. The men Cortés had paid off switched sides in mid-battle. By dawn, Narvaez was wounded and captured. and his army had joined Cortés. But back in the capital, a new problem was developing. The Aztecs were preparing for a sacred feast. In observance, the Aztec citizens made effigies of their gods and beat ritual drums to celebrate. The man Cortés had left in charge, Pedro de Alvarado, didn't understand what was happening, and he interpreted the behavior as threatening. He believed the Aztecs were preparing a surprise attack on the Spaniards. Surrounded by 500,000 Aztecs, Alvarado panicked.
He pulled his troops up around the 3 gateways to this courtyard and just opened fire and killed many, many, many people.
Alvarado and his men slaughtered all of the nobles and priests. Then the conquistadors killed any Aztec citizen within reach. Cortés received word of the massacre. He was told that Alvarado and his men were alive but surrounded. The conquistador rushed back to Tenochtitlan with his reinforced army. It was a shock to Cortés and his new conquistadors when they found they had to fight their way back into the city. What followed was organized urban warfare. The conquistadors and the Aztecs fought throughout the city. Warriors fell on both sides. The Aztecs would celebrate their dead and then immediately return to fighting. The Aztecs employed their own form of psychological warfare. They used ritual drumming and rolled severed heads down the street to harass the trapped and exhausted conquistadors. A frustrated Cortés forced the imprisoned emperor to try to pacify his people. What happened when Montezuma addressed his people is one of the most controversial events in the history of Mexico.
According to the Spaniards, he's out there trying to calm people down, and his own people throw rocks at him, hit him in the head, and then he dies a few days later from those wounds. Other people say that the Spaniards stabbed Moctezuma to death, and so there are 2 conflicting stories to the same event. Was Moctezuma killed by his own people when they rejected his authority, or did the Spaniards do him in after they realized he was of no use?
Regardless of how it happened, the result was the same. Montezuma was killed. And a bad situation was getting worse for Cortés. To save his life and the lives of his men, he had to find a way out of Tenochtitlan, and fast. Now, here's some tips for conquerors from Hernán Cortés. Don't neglect the politics. Make alliances when and where you can. Quickly determine and exploit your enemy's weakness. And a secret weapon gives you an ace in the hole. It was the end of June 1520. Wary of a final assault, Cortés divided his troops and plotted several escape routes out of the city. With Aztec gold in hand, the conquistadors set out. When Cortés's army had nearly made it across the causeways, an Aztec citizen sounded the alarm. And within minutes, the Spaniards were surrounded by countless war canoes. The panicked Spaniards tried to run, but the Aztecs came along in wave after wave. More Aztec war canoes kept appearing. There was retreat, confusion, bedlam, death. Everywhere, conquistadors and horses were being pulled into the lake and drowned. Cortés lost half his army, along with thousands of his native allies. The retreat of the Spaniards from Tenochtitlan is known as La Noche Triste, the Sad Night.